Welcome to the Highland Park Middle School announcements. I'm Hamza.
And I'm Mikkel.
Support a local charity and the art department by joining us for the Arts Showcase and Empty Soup Bowl charity fundraiser on Thursday, June 2nd from 4:45 until 7 o'clock. While you're there, you can grab a bowl of homemade soup and then experience a variety of visual and performing arts.
This Friday, May 20th, is the last day to check out books from the library. All library books must be returned or paid for by Friday, May 27th, or you will not be able to attend your end-of-the-year team activity. If you have any questions about your overdue books, please see Ms. Olson as soon as possible. And 8th grade accelerated science students, turn in red textbooks to the library.
In addition to turning in your library books, students will be turning in iPads, cables, and chargers on June 1st and June 2nd. If you don't turn in all your items you were loaned or paid to replace them, you won't be able to attend any end-of-the-year activities at school. And in most cases, you won't be issued replacement items next fall. Replacement cost for a charger, brick, or cable is $13 each. It's also time to start backing up your important photos, videos, and documents for your iPad to your Google Drive account. You can learn more about backing up your data at the URL below.
So when you think of the word dare, what do you think of?
When I think of dare, I think of being embarrassed.
When I think of dare, I think of being the impossible. When I think of dare, I think of someone playing truth or dare.
When I think of dare, I think of the word impossible.
Do something.
When I think of daring, I think of someone who takes risks. When I think of daring, I think of challenge.
When I think of the word daring, I think of someone forcing you to do.
When I think of the word daring, I think crazy.
When I think of the word daring, I think of bravery.
Just do it.
When I think of the word dare, I think of something bad.
Fun and exciting.
Being brave.
Scary. When someone forces you to do something scary.
Like the getting truth or dare. When I think of the word dare, I think of the words exciting and adventurous.
It's something risky that you do to impress your friends.
When I think of the word daring, I think of having the courage to do something different.
You think about being challenged.
When I think of daring, I think of taking a risk.
Bravery.
The French students went on a field trip to the French Concordia Language Village camp in Bemidji this past weekend. They enjoyed many activities in French and learned all about Jacques Cousteau, a famous Frenchman known for undersea exploration, aquatic research, photography, and numerous film documentaries.
Ms. Kazmarek and Ms. Mulvaney will be talking to current 6th and 7th graders during the 2nd and 3rd week of May about registering for next year's classes. Students will bring registration paperwork home so that parents have the opportunity to review the class choices. Signed registration forms are due back to Ms. Kazmarek and Ms. Mulvaney by Friday, May 28th.
¿Sabías que? Esta es la última instalación de ¿Sabías que?
Nos vemos el año que viene.
Adiós.
Adiós. Adiós.
On July 22, 1975, the Apollo 18 capsule docked with the Soyuz 19 capsule. When the astronauts first encountered each other in space, they exchanged warm greetings and symbolic gifts, ushering in a new era of cooperation between the United States and Soviet Union, leading to many new opportunities for exploration and discovery. The scientific work they did was profound, giving scientists the ability to exchange knowledge all around the world. But the social work led us into an era where 16 nations could cooperate to build the International Space Station and beyond.
The mission started in October 1970 during the height of the Cold War, as the first American delegates, led by George Low, the administrator of NASA, arrived in Moscow to meet with the Russian delegation, led by Mstislav Keldyish. This was at a time when the US and the USSR were engaged in a proxy war in Vietnam, and America was in the midst of an active lunar program, with astronauts who had walked the moon less than 6 months prior. The American delegates' mission was to begin the cooperation between the United States and Soviet Union in space, which would effectively end the space race. They were in the midst of a period of détente in the Cold War, created by agreements that enhanced the scientific cooperation of the US and the USSR by promoting exchange of knowledge from meteorological satellites and cooperation to launch more. Space cooperation assists countries involved by easing the economic burden on each country and allows countries to utilize technologies that they do not possess to allow for more advanced exploration. During the delegation's trip to Moscow, there was civil unrest following the bombings carried out by the Jewish Defense League on Soviet targets in response to a trial in the USSR, which the American public perceived to have anti-Semitic overtones. Immediately upon the delegation's entry into the airport, the Americans met with Boris Nikolaevich Petrov and his colleagues. Then the Americans and their hosts were off to Moscow for their first introduction to the historic Hotel Russia. Their next stop was to Zvezny Gorodak, or Star City, the cosmonaut training center. Following a brief greeting ceremony, the Americans were taken to the simulation facility, where the cosmonauts practiced flight procedures. This was the first of many meetings between the Soviets and Americans, where the two groups worked together. Based upon the rapid exchange of technical data and the tone of my recent correspondence with Keldyish, I decided that it might be worthwhile to raise the possibility of a joint flight, according to George Low in an interview. And thus began the many years of exchange of technology and knowledge between the USSR and the United States. Once again, it appeared that the desire to cooperate in space exploration outweighed any extraneous political events, according to George Low.
The partners decided not to use existing space stations from the Soviet Union or United States because the equipment was too complex and neither side wanted to give up too much classified information about their current space projects. Instead, for the first international docking of vessels in space, they used the existing Apollo and Soyuz capsules and adapted them for maneuvers and science experiments. The final plans for this cooperative mission were approved in April of 1972 when Leonid Brezhnev and Richard Nixon signed Agreement Concerning Cooperation in the Exploration and Use of Outer Space for Peaceful Purposes. The Americans were less uncomfortable with the aforementioned trials conducted by the Soviet Union, and after meetings between Nixon and Brezhnev, citizens from both countries were more able to see commonalities rather than differences between the two superpowers.
Actually, I think after Americans landed on the moon, Soviet Union realized that they're not necessarily the leaders in a space exploration anymore, and so there was more willingness to negotiate.
There was also a situation posed that if some astronauts were stuck in space, the most the other country could do was watch. So they needed to develop compatible docking mechanisms. The agreement that the two leaders signed stated the United States and USSR agree to enhance cooperation in outer space by utilizing the capabilities of both countries for joint projects of mutual benefit. Finally, the Apollo-Soyuz mission was on track for a launch. In the first half of 1973, both countries announced who would be flying this landmark mission. The United States announced Vance Brand, Donald Slayton, and the commander, Thomas Stafford, who had pioneered docking in space. And the USSR announced Valery Kubasov and Alexei Leonov, who was the first man to walk in space. During the 3-year period in which they worked together on the space mission, the engineers and staff explored and exchanged each other's cultures and technologies. The Americans at first were shocked when they encountered equipment from the Soviet side that was much simpler than the equipment the Americans were using. They were astonished how much the Soviets could accomplish with this equipment. After these years full of intensive work from both sides readying for the mission, finally, on July 15th of 1975, Soyuz 19 was launched, followed by Apollo 18 just 7.5 hours later. The two commanders docked the capsules, and the mission became a joint one, with Leonov and Stafford opening the hatch between the two nations. They shook hands, marking the end to the space race.
This occasion was so momentous that President Ford called the space explorers directly, and Brezhnev sent a letter with the cosmonauts to the entire crew. What they said was broadcasted worldwide.
New possibilities are opening up for fruitful development of scientific cooperation between countries and the peoples in the interests of peace and progress of all humanity.
And I'm confident that the day is not far off when space missions made possible
by this first joint effort will be more or less commonplace.
This mission launched years of cooperation between the two countries, pouring through data and extending the results. Many new cooperative missions have been launched since that first groundbreaking encounter in space. For example, Deep Space One and ExoMars, both cooperative explorations of the Red Planet, were launched in October 1998 and March 2016 respectively. Russia, Argentina, Brazil, India, New Zealand, Norway, Denmark, Pakistan, Spain, the United Kingdom, Canada, and France have all taken part in cooperative space missions. Some countries that have cooperated in such work are bitter enemies, like Pakistan and India. The US and the USSR provided a great model for such cooperation. Still today, the cooperation between the United States and Russia keeps tensions in check. The 5 astronauts involved in this mission went on to enjoy successful careers, pioneering spacewalks, conducting impressive docking maneuvers, and piloting the space shuttle and other advanced air and spacecraft. However, their greatest contribution to the exchange of knowledge among countries was their work on the Apollo-Soyuz. Collaboration allowed for an increased level of knowledge between countries. For example, the Apollo spacecraft worked in unison with the Soyuz capsule to create the first ever man-made eclipse so that the Soviet team could explore the sun's corona. The cosmonauts also worked hand in hand with the American astronauts in devising the first generation of stratospheric aerosol measurements, also known as SAM. This experiment helped scientists better understand what was happening with the Earth's climate, and the information gained could be exchanged with climate and atmospheric scientists all over the world. They also exchanged knowledge with the general public and filmed experiments that they did to be shown live to people all around the world to spark their interest in science and in symbiosis between countries.
This mission did not end the Cold War, but it eased the existential threat of war that many people in both countries feared. It also opened the way for civilian technology development.
Well, our competition then moved more to the realm of civilian technology like computers and computer networks, where, for example, the United States took a lead in the 1970s, or in the beginning of the 1970s, started to develop what we today know as the Internet.
Gerald Ford and Leonid Brezhnev hit it right on the head with their sentiments about the future of space travel. Less than a quarter century later, because of the bright new future this long mission revealed, cooperative missions in space were commonplace, and the International Space Station, the most expensive man-made object, was under construction, with parts, launches, and astronauts from 15 countries and over 136 missions to space. All of the work in space that we do today is enabled by international cooperation. The Americans currently rely on our relationship with Russia to get us to space in their Soyuz capsule. The Apollo-Soyuz mission broke the barrier that kept countries from working together in space. It gave body to George Low's message that scientific collaboration can leap any barrier, any bound. As a human race, we now have the ability to explore further and exchange even more knowledge.
Thanks for watching the Highland Park Middle School announcements.
This is our last episode for this year.
So see you again next year.